The earth trembled beneath my feet, and for a moment, I thought the world had ended. A deep, guttural roar echoed through the forest, rattling the trees and shaking the ground. I turned to run, but the shadows, they moved. I had no idea what I had just stumbled into, but I could feel it. Something ancient, something powerful, was waiting for me to uncover it. And I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The first whisper. I didn't believe in legends. Not the ones my grandfather used to tell, not the ones scribbled in crumbling books I found in the dusty corners of libraries. But when the tremor hit, I realized something had been awakened, something that had been buried for centuries. I had been tracking the old path for days, convinced I was chasing some ridiculous myth. A ruined fortress. An ancient king's lost treasure. But the deeper I went into the wilderness, the more I felt the pull, like something was drawing me closer to the edge of madness. The people in the village had warned me, nobody had returned from the path I was on. I stopped to catch my breath when I saw it. A stone archway half hidden by thick vines, covered in markings I didn't recognize. My heart raced. The forest had gone silent. Too silent. That's when I heard it. The whisper. You're too late. The forgotten king. The whisper sent a chill down my spine. I shouldn't have gone deeper, but I couldn't stop myself. My feet moved on their own, carrying me forward as if the forest itself was urging me. I stumbled into a hidden grove, and there it was, half crushed under the weight of centuries. A massive stone statue of a man, his face fierce and unyielding, a king long forgotten by time. His eyes seemed to burn with an intensity that froze me in place. I stepped closer. My hand trembled as I touched the stone. The air around me thickened, and the whisper came again, louder this time. He will rise. And when he does, the lands will burn. I pulled back, heart pounding. This was no ordinary king. This was a figure out of history's darkest corners. And somehow, I had awakened him. The truth unveiled. I should have run. Should have turned back. But I didn't. I couldn't. My mind was consumed with the whispers, the unanswered questions gnawing at me. Who was this king? What did he want? And why was the earth shaking? It wasn't long before the answers started revealing themselves. Too late, of course. The king wasn't just a man. He was a legend. A forgotten hero turned tyrant, sealed away by the very people he had ruled. A betrayal had caused his fall, a betrayal that, according to the stories, had cursed the land. And now, that curse had been broken. The ground began to shake again, and this time, I could feel it deep in my bones. The shadows moved. The air grew thick with the scent of smoke. Something was coming. Something ancient, and it was looking for me. The chase. I thought I could escape. But you don't outrun the shadows of the past. They chase you. They find you. The path I had taken was now a maze of twisted roots, the trees bent and contorted as if they were reaching for me. I could feel their eyes on me. And worse, something was following. I ran faster, but the whispers grew louder, more frantic. They echoed in my mind, urging me to turn back, to leave it all behind. But I couldn't. I couldn't go back now. The statue. The king. They were not what I thought. He had never been forgotten. And the reason the curse had been placed upon him? To keep him locked away. But now he was free. And I had unleashed him. The awakening. The trees gave way to an open clearing. The sky above was pitch black, the stars hidden behind thick clouds. The air crackled with energy. I turned. And there he stood. The king. His stone face had come to life, now a grotesque form of what it once was, his eyes glowing like embers. His armor was not of this world, and his presence, so powerful, so ancient, it shook the ground beneath my feet. You freed me, he whispered, his voice like the sound of distant thunder. I couldn't speak. Fear had stolen my voice. Now, the world will feel my wrath, he finished, taking a step forward. And that was when I realized, the shadows of ancient heroes had never been forgotten. They were waiting for this moment. Waiting for someone like me to bring them back. I had no idea what I had just unleashed. But I knew this, nothing would ever be the same again. The gathering storm. The king's gaze never wavered, and neither did mine. He was a force, something beyond what I could comprehend, and yet I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling the earth tremble beneath his steps. His voice rumbled again, but this time, it was different. It was not just a whisper, it was a command. You will help me, he said, each word heavy with power. You awoke me. Now you will lead me to the ones who locked me away. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. There was no escaping him now. I had unleashed this nightmare, and somehow, it seemed like the only way forward was to follow. He didn't give me a choice. I turned away, my mind racing. I had to figure out how to stop this. But deep down, I knew. It was already too late. The price of power. The king wasn't alone. As we ventured further into the ruins, I realized there were others, figures cloaked in darkness, their eyes gleaming like predators hunting in the shadows. These were his soldiers, his followers, the ones who had lived through his reign of terror. They had waited for centuries, hidden in the forgotten corners of the world, biding their time. And now, they were ready to rise again. Where are they? The king's voice cracked the silence like a whip. I dared not answer. I didn't know where they were. But I was starting to understand. This wasn't just about the king's resurrection. It was about restoring an entire kingdom, a kingdom that had been erased from history. And I was the key, the unseen enemy. The whispers came again, but they weren't from the king. These were different. They were faint, barely audible, but they were everywhere. The trees, the wind, the very earth beneath my feet. They told me things. Horrible things. You cannot stop it. You are too weak. I tried to push the voices out of my mind. But they crept back in, like shadows beneath the surface, clawing at my sanity. The king's plans were unfolding faster than I had imagined. The land was changing. The air was thick with an unnatural tension. The ancient curse wasn't just about imprisonment, it was about keeping something far worse contained. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting to stop the king. I was fighting something even older. Something that had been waiting for this very moment to strike. The betrayal. As we neared the old citadel, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The earth was cracking open, like the very land was breaking apart. Dark, swirling clouds gathered overhead, blotting out the sun. The ground beneath us seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "It's happening," the king muttered, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the top of the citadel, a woman, her silhouette framed by the lightning flashing across the sky. She was wearing an ancient robe, adorned with symbols I recognized from the king's tomb. "I should have known. You should have stayed away," she said, her voice cold, devoid of emotion. It was my mother. The woman, my mother, had been part of it all. She had known. She had always known. The betrayal was complete. She had watched over me all these years, feeding me lies, feeding me the myth of an ancient curse, when in reality, she was preparing me for this moment. Her hands were raised, glowing with dark energy as she chanted words I couldn't understand. The ground around her shifted, rising as if it were alive. The king, who had once seemed unstoppable, was now frozen in place, his eyes locked on my mother with a mix of disbelief and rage. "Why?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "Because," she replied with a smirk, "the world needs to remember. I needed to remind it of who we really are." And with those final words, she unleashed the power of the ancient kingdom, sealing my fate. I had made a choice. But it was the wrong one. The forgotten legacy. The world around me erupted in chaos. The ground split open, and the air was thick with an overwhelming force. My mother's voice echoed through the ruins, a low, powerful hum that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. The king, now a shadow of his former self, stood still, frozen by the raw energy she controlled. The very land was trembling, as if it too remembered the ancient power being unleashed. I could feel it in my chest, the weight of centuries of secrets pressing down on me, choking me. But even in the midst of the storm, something clicked. Something inside me broke free. I wasn't just a witness to history unfolding, I was a part of it. My mother had always known, but what she didn't know was that I had inherited more than just her blood. I had inherited the key to the forgotten legacy. It wasn't the king's power that had awoken the earth, it was mine. In that moment, the truth hit me like a wave crashing against a cliff. The king had been a protector once, a guardian of something far older, far more dangerous. His resurrection had been the spark, but I was the fire. It was always meant to be me. I stepped forward, heart pounding, my every instinct telling me to run. But I didn't. I couldn't. The air shifted again, and this time, it wasn't my mother's will that shaped the land, it was mine. I raised my hands, feeling the pulse of ancient power coursing through me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. "You think you control this, mother?" I said, my voice strong, almost unfamiliar. "You never did. You just fed on the ashes of what was once great." Her face twisted with disbelief, her eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen before, fear. The king's gaze flickered toward me. In his eyes, there was something almost like understanding. He had been used, betrayed, just like I had been. And now, in the shadow of this moment, we were both standing on the same precipice, staring into the abyss of the past that we had both been forced to face. But this wasn't about vengeance. It was about the truth that had been buried, forgotten, for far too long. I wasn't my mother's pawn. I wasn't anyone's pawn. I was the last of the bloodline. And I was the one who would decide whether the world would burn, or whether it would be reborn. The choice. In an instant, everything went quiet. The earth stilled. The storm subsided. My hands still crackled with the power of ages, but now it was a choice, a decision I had to make. The world could continue on its current path, decay, manipulation, endless cycles of war and betrayal. Or, I could end it all, erase the past, and give the future a chance to heal. But there was one thing my mother never understood. The true strength wasn't in the ability to command power, it was in knowing when to let go. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. And with a final, deliberate motion, I released the energy I had kept coiled within me. It wasn't an explosion. It was a quiet ripple that spread through the land, the echo of a decision that would change everything. The king's form began to fade, not into dust, but into something else, something peaceful, almost serene. The shadows that had consumed him were now gone. The curse lifted. And as for my mother, her face softened, the anger and hatred melting away. She had been consumed by her own hunger for power, but in that final moment, she understood. She was no longer needed. I stood alone in the ruins of the forgotten kingdom. The land was still. The world was quiet. I had ended the cycle. But the legacy was far from over. The shadows of ancient heroes had been erased, but their story, our story, was just beginning.